Welcome to a Greenville County Library System virtual event. My name is Rachel and I'm the Adult Outreach and Event Coordinator for the Greenville County Library System. I'm so pleased you could join us for this event, Soil Health Exploration, presented by Greenville County Soil and Water Conservation District. If you're interested in other virtual events and activities, be sure to check out our website, greenvillelibrary.org. You'll also want to select Adult Events under our Classes and Events button to see our events calendar. And of course, if you're interested in checking out gardening and sustainability materials to go along with this soil health presentation, make sure that your library card is up to date and come visit us at any one of our locations. We look forward to serving you soon. So please join me now in welcoming our presenters for today, Kirsten and Shanine with Greenville County Soil and Water Conservation District. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Rachel. My name is Shanine Haler, and we are going to explore soil health over the next 2 months. We're going to go ahead and give you all the details you need, and let's go ahead and get started tonight. So here we go. Like I mentioned, my name is Shanine Haler. I am co-presenting today. My official title is Stormwater Programs Coordinator with Greenville County Soil and Water Conservation District. So I do all of our education on stormwater management to all age groups across Greenville County, and I also support soil health education as well. Kirsten, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Kirsten Robertson, and I am the manager of the Greenville County Soil and Water Conservation District. And I am super excited about soil health. And that's why I am so excited to share it with you. And I guess that's about the biggest thing I have.
Awesome. Yeah. Kirsten is a soil health expert, and we're so lucky to have her with us tonight. Y'all also already heard from Rachel. She is the Adult Outreach and Event Coordinator with the Greenville County Library System. She'll be moderating our chat tonight. So if y'all have questions and you want to type them in there, go right ahead. But since we are a smaller group, you are more than welcome to unmute yourself and ask your question when you have it. So before we get into the actual content for tonight, I just want to do a little bit of virtual and physical space prep. So go ahead, y'all have your device and you're already connected to internet. Make sure you have your soil health kit handy, especially one of your flags and the cotton undies that we sent you. You'll need a shovel or a trowel. When we're going to take a little break towards the end to go ahead and actually plant our undies. And you'll want a marker. We're going to write on our flag the date, so we remember when we actually put those cotton underwear in the ground. As far as our virtual space goes, go ahead if you can and you know how, rename yourself with your first name, last initial, and your pronouns, please. And then ensure you're muted, and we'd love it if you could turn your video on. If not, no worries, it's not a requirement. And then we already talked about the questions in the chat. Raise your virtual hand, or tonight, just unmute yourself and ask. All right. Any questions before we get into it? All right. I do not see any. And y'all will see me looking to the side a little bit. I have my videos up on one monitor and my presentation up on the other. So we'll be back and forth a little bit. Okay, here we go. So thank you again for joining us. Tonight we're going to talk about all things soil, and I could not be more excited. Soil is like the foundation to all life, and both Kirsten and I get really, really excited when we talk about this. So we're going to talk about the basics of soil, just as a little bit of overview and review. Kirsten's going to hit on soil life, soil health principles, and then I'm going to jump back in. We're going to talk about the Soil Your Undies Challenge, which is why you are all here tonight. And then we'll go through what comes next. Over the next couple months, we're going to send you different soil experiments that you can do on your own with the materials that we provided. So first and foremost, soil composition. Has anybody here studied soil before or heard about soil in general before? You can like raise your hand or virtually raise your hand. Yeah, I see Rachel has. Anybody else? Dennis, of course. Yes, awesome. Well, for those of you that haven't, soil has 4 major components, and that's going to be this first pie chart here. we're going to see 25 healthy, ideal soil. This is what it will look like. 25% water, 25% air, 45% minerals or sand, silt, clay. So sand, silt, and clay are different particle sizes within soil. And we want to have a relatively balanced proportion of each of those things, but the different percentages of sand, silt, and clay make up different types of soils. So here in South Carolina, especially in the upstate, we have a lot of heavy clay soils. And that changes the way that our soil acts and interacts with rain and plants and all of that. Where I'm from, Minnesota, we have a lot more silt. So we have what we call loam soil, and it's beautiful and black and quite lovely. Very different from what we have here. Air and water are super, super important. I don't know if you ever think about it, but like there is air in soil because there is pore space in soil, and water will fill in the pore space that air kind of helps create. This last little part is the most important. It's organic matter. And organic matter can be divided into this second pie chart that we have on the slide here. So humus is very dead organic matter. It's that rich, we call it like a soil conditioner almost. It's that stuff that's really fluffy. It smells kind of sweet if you've ever like walked on a forest floor. This is what makes that soil soft, easy for plants' roots to grow through and all of that. Then you're gonna have 25% actively decomposing materials. So that's gonna be your recently felled tree or fresh leaves on the ground, and you're gonna see all of your little soil critters in there eating up that material. And that's super important because that's what's bringing in new nutrients, and it will become humus over time. Then we have 10% like just dead material. That's like strictly soil conditioner that doesn't really have a lot of nutrient value, but it is important to have in our soil. And then finally, we have this tiny 5% of 5% is living roots and organisms in our soil. And the reason it's highlighted green here, Kirsten's going to touch on in a little bit, but that teeny tiny 5% of 5%, that is the most important part of our soil. That is how we know how healthy our soil is, by the measure of organisms and living roots in soil. A little bit different than what most of us hear, right? Has anybody here had a soil test done, either through Clemson or through somewhere else? Raise your hand, let me know. We're going to be a little interactive tonight. I know that might be strange.
We tested our soil through Clemson.
Awesome. Yes. Yeah, I'm assuming Dennis has as well, but I don't want to call him out. I know Kirsten has, and I've helped people do it as well. So what soil tests usually tell us is the nutrient content of our soil, and that helps us know what's available to plants, but it's not really getting at, do we have healthy soil? And we're going to go ahead and help y'all learn like what healthy soil looks like and how we can help promote soil health. Any questions on soil composition before we move to the next thing? Awesome, Dennis. I've tested mine for lawns. Okay, soil is A. Now I'm going to have you all use that chat box. What do you think soil is? Because soil is lots of things. It's not just dirt, and it's not dirt, actually. Dirt is what's on the bottom of your shoe. Soil is what's in the ground. What is soil? Any guesses? Unmute yourself. Go ahead. Soil is a habitat, a living organism. Yes, thank you, Lynette. So soil is a habitat for living organisms, something that buildings stand on. Thank you, Kirsten. Yes. It is not dirt, it's a medium for growing plants. Yes, also correct. I have a whole list of things here and y'all are hitting on a bunch of them. A growing medium, we said that. An anchor, we said that. Something that buildings stand on, but it's also an anchor for plants and trees and everything around us, really. It's a building material as well. So it's something that buildings stand on, but it's also something that we use to create buildings. a nutrient source. It holds water, it holds minerals and all of those kind of things that plants need to grow. It is also a water filter. Has anybody heard that before? This is where I get really excited. Soil is a natural water filter. It's vital. Yes, Carmen, soil is vital to all life. We're going to talk about that in just a second. Foundational to all life. We would not be here if it weren't for soil, period. All right, with that, I'm going to hand over the talking part to Kirsten, and we are going to talk about soil life. Before we go, any questions? Okay, let's move on to soil life.
Okay, so one thing that I neglected to say is that I am also a farmer in the lower part of Greenville County. And I raise goats and sheep and chickens. And at one time, I had a CSA where I grew vegetables for families. So very much into the soil. We've been there for 32 years, and I tried my best to follow the Clemson recommendations and do everything that all the farmers that I knew, like my dad was a farmer. We didn't farm when I was growing up, but we visited my grandfather's farm, and I knew about tractors, and our neighbors farmed with tractors. And so we got a tractor and we farmed the way everybody else did. And then we decided that our garden needed to be a little bit smaller. So we started some intensive gardening, and it was fine. Like, I was successful. And then through my job working for the Soil and Water Conservation District, I learned about soil health through the Natural Resources Conservation Service. And that they are part of USDA. It's a federal agency. And they were teaching about soil health. And that's what Shanine was kind of talking about a little bit earlier. And that soil health, learning about that actually changed everything for me. It completely changed my life. So let's talk a little bit about that and why that is. Shanine, can you move it on, please? There we go. Okay, so we talked about that soil is a habitat. Let's start with the plant. So we have a plant, and plants take sunlight and turn that sunlight into sugars and energy. And they use some of those sugars to grow, and they use some to make like nectar so that the bees would come. Have you ever thought about that plants actually make sugar, like they're making something sweet for the bees to come to? Well, they make these sugars, and as much as 80% of the sugars they make, they just dump out of their roots into the soil. 80% of the sugars they make dump out into the soil. Now, why would they waste all that? Well, it's really cool because Mother Nature doesn't waste anything. There is a reason for everything. And the reason that those plants put those sugars out through their roots is because there are microbes in the soil. There are all kinds of different bacteria and protozoa and nematodes and fungi, and they form this web that use those sugars. And it's just so they make this symbiosis, and we'll talk a little bit about it. The bacteria eat the sugars, and then in turn, plants can't really mine the nutrients out of those mineral particles that Shanine was talking about. So they can't go really get phosphorus. They need bacteria and fungi to mine those things out of the nearby soil particles and bring it back to the plant. So the bacteria are needed, and that's one reason why that plant is giving out 80% of its sugars. Now the fungi, they're pretty cool because y'all know about mushrooms, right? You've seen a mushroom. Well, a mushroom is the fruiting body of the fungi, and it's all over the bottom and underneath the ground. I see some knowing glances there. So the fungi is under the ground, and it can go a lot further and in a lot smaller places than the plant roots. And so that fungi can actually go out and get water and other nutrients and bring it back to the plant. And the plant can tell the fungi exactly which nutrients it wants. It's very, very intricate and complicated and intentional. And it's fascinating and so much fun to learn about. So these plants have this relationship with all of the microbes, and there's a lot of microbes. So in a healthy soil, in 1 teaspoon of healthy soil, there can be as many microbes as there are people on Earth. So that's 7 billion in a teaspoon of soil. That just blows my mind. Like that many microbes, if you have a healthy soil, all of that is working together to help make your plants healthy, to bring them the food and the water that they need. So let's see, let's move on to the next slide, please. So another thing, and I don't know why I don't see there we go. Another thing that the microbes do, the fungi, they exude, they kind of sweat out this glue, and it's called glomalin. And what the glomalin is, it's a sticky substance, and it kind of binds those mineral particles together, but it also holds them apart. So it's a lot like a sponge. And the structure of a sponge, you can see in between that there's something holding it together, but it's also holding those holes apart and making sure that there are holes. And it's those holes that are so important. So just a second, I'm trying to look at my notes and do this at the same time. Okay, Shanine, can you move on to the next one, please? So the spaces in between where your, like in your sponge, these spaces, that's where all of the magic happens. So remember when Shanine was teaching us about the spaces in soil, about 50% of your soil is going to be spaces. Now, 25% will be air, and the other 25% will be full of water, but there's still spaces. Now, those microbes require water. They have to have water. So, and they also need air to breathe, just like we do. Every living thing needs air and water and habitat and food. Well, the plants are giving them food, and those spaces give the air and water and habitat. That's why they're giving out those glues, so that they're kind of making, it's all making the environment that it needs to live. So if you don't have those spaces, and Shanine, if you could make the text pop up. Not sure why it didn't. Without all those spaces, what you have is a brick. And I'm sure a lot of you have seen soil in our area that looks and feels a whole lot like this. There are no spaces in this brick, which means that there are probably very few microbes alive in this brick, since it doesn't have those other things that it needs. So, okay, what is our next one? So we're going to talk about how how all this works together. Some really smart people at NRCS have learned that there are 5 principles to actually mimic nature to make gardening easier. So if you look at a forest, nobody tills that, and there are huge plants growing, and nobody's fertilizing it, and everything seems to be green and healthy. So nobody's watering it. the water seems to fall, and actually forests absorb more water than almost any other terrain. So there's something happening in there with Mother Nature in charge, that if we can harness it, then it will make our lives easier. And so these very smart people at NRCS came up with these 5 soil health principles, and we're going to talk about them today. So to mimic nature, the 5 principles, and I've got these little hand motions that I have to do to be able to remember them. So we're going to do them, okay? So the first one is to keep your soil covered. So this is, can you see it? This is your soil right here. You're going to keep it covered, all right? The second one is you're going to limit disturbance. So in this one, our soil is going to look a little disturbed, and we're going to stir it, all right? So we're disturbing the soil, and we'll talk about each of these a little bit later, and how it works, and what we can do to follow nature. The third one is to keep a living root. So here's your soil, here's your roots. Your roots are going down through the soil. The fourth one is to maximize your plant diversity. So you want as many different kinds of plants in an area as possible. So there's your soil. Here's your plant, and it's not all that diverse. I guess the thumb is smaller or bigger than the pinky. I should have painted each fingernail a different color, but pretend those are diverse plants. And then the last one is to integrate animals. So here's your soil, and then somehow I've got to try to make it look like I have an animal. And we're going to talk all about those right now when Shanine moves the thing. Excellent. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to keep our soil covered. What does that mean? It means keep it covered. So it means when you look down at the ground that you don't want to see bare soil. Now I've got a farm, and my goal for my farm is that if I flip a quarter anywhere on the property, that quarter, when it falls on the ground, will not land on bare soil. Now I'm not there yet. I'm not going to claim that I am, but that is my goal. And when I see a bare spot, I will go out and I will cover it. So what can you cover it with? You can cover it with straw or hay, or a living plant counts as cover. But what we're doing in covering it is we're mimicking a forest floor. And if you think about a forest, it's covered by both a mulch, all the dead leaves coming down, or maybe pine needles, branches and bark that's covering the ground, the leaf litter. And it's also covered by the plants themselves. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But what this makes is it makes the soil cooler. And if you've ever walked in a quiet forest, you know that it's a lot more peaceful, and it's a lot cooler. So what the shade from the plants is keeping that soil cool, as well as the mulch. And this is really important because bare soil is actually usually a higher temperature than the temperature outside. It gets to be 100 degrees here sometimes in the summer. So that means that your bare soil might be 120 degrees. It might be 140 degrees. It can be a lot higher. So once you start getting into those higher temperatures, the soil microbes actually start dying. So it's really important for that soil life to keep it cool and shaded. And the mulch will shade it as well. So when you do that, you get some other benefits. And one is that you won't lose your soil. Your topsoil is your best soil, right? The stuff at the top is the stuff with the most organic matter, as opposed to when you go really deep where there's not much organic matter. And the stuff that always erodes off is the good stuff on the top. So if you have a mulch or something on your soil, then it won't erode. It will also require less weeding. So how many people have mulched their gardens? Has anybody done that? Either raise your hand or show me in the chat. It's kind of an unusual concept. But mulching my garden, when I started doing that, it changed my life. Like there wasn't weeding anymore. It's pretty amazing deal. Highly recommend it. Ah, there you go, Dynasty. It is just a wonderful thing. So anyway, what we want to do is mimic a forest floor. Let's see. Let's move on to the next one. So that was keep it covered. The next one is limit disturbance. And there are a lot of different kinds of disturbance. You can disturb your soil by stepping on it, which compacts it, and that mushes those air spaces, right? One major disturbance is plowing and tilling, and that's what most gardeners do to get their gardens ready for planting. And also cultivation, they cultivate it, and when you hoe it to keep the weeds out, what that steel in the ground does is it breaks up those networks. It breaks up the fungi and the glomalin holding the pore spaces open, and that turns your soil into the brick that we were talking about earlier. So if you're interested in learning more about how to do that, we'll probably, hopefully, maybe one day have more more educational series on how to do no-till gardening or no-dig gardening. But if you want to learn more about it, just research it on the internet, and there's all kinds of people out there that are doing it, and you can get some new ideas, and you kind of have to reframe your ideas of gardening when you do it this way. It's very different. Okay, so we've covered our soil, we've limited disturbance, and now we're going to keep a living root. So if you have bare soil, how many of you have dug up your garden for the summer and then not been able to plant immediately? What does Mother Nature do to your garden? It dries out the soil for sure. Absolutely. I would add that Mother Nature also plants her own garden, and she does it with the seeds that she has handy. And those seeds are weed seeds. So if you plant what you want, then what that does is it crowds out what Mother Nature would want. A lot of times those weed seeds need sunlight, and if your seeds are already shading the soil, then those weed seeds won't germinate. So what you always want to do is try to keep a living root at all times. And what did we talk about earlier with the microbes? They need something to eat, and what they eat is, they call it the exudates from those roots. So if they don't have a root, they don't have anything to eat. So you always want to keep a root. Most of us in the fall, we finish up our garden and we either let it lie fallow and overwinter as it is, because we're all hot and tired from gardening. Some people may till it up, but generally most people don't plant anything in the fall around here. Well, we have learned through these principles of soil health that you should have a living root in the soil year round. So we encourage you to use cover crops in the off season to keep those microbes fed and hungry, and so that they can wake up and get going fast in the spring when it's time to get going. When you look at a forest, do you see a natural forest? Do you see all of one crop, or or one tree, or do you see all kinds of different trees and different sizes of plants, like the the tall trees and then maybe bushes, that kind of thing. So that's what Mother Nature wants. And there are actually 7 layers of a forest. She really overdoes it a little bit, I'd say. So there's the canopy, the under canopy, there's the shrub layer, the herbaceous layer, the vines going up through it. There are all these different layers and they can all coexist. That's what she loves the most. So she has made the plants so that they work the best like that. If you plant different plants together, they have different root systems. Some of them are like thin, long roots, like a carrot, or there are a lot of different plants that are like that, but they dig down really deep and they can get nutrients from down deep. They can get water from down deep. And then there are other plants that have very fibrous roots. So all these different root systems, if you put them together, it actually makes your garden more drought resistant. The different roots get water from different levels in the soil profile. And so the plants don't need as much water. In addition, your plants will be hardier because the pests can't find them. So it's really cool. They have, it's well known that you will not have as many pests on your plants if you have lots of different plants, because they literally can't find them, and it's not as attractive to come to your garden as maybe your neighbor's garden who has all of his tomatoes in a big long row where it's a buffet for the tomato hornworm, versus you where you have all these different plants in different sizes and they can't smell it out and figure out which plant is which. It really does deter the pests. Same with diseases. If a tomato plant has a disease and it moves through, perhaps it's on the leaf and it touches the plant next to it that's the same type of plant, well, that disease is going to move on down the line. But if a tomato plant is not touching another tomato plant, say it's touching a corn plant, they don't have the same diseases. And so it won't go any further unless wind takes it. But in general, it will cut down on all your pests and diseases as well. So you always want to maximize your plant diversity as well. And then the last one, Shanine, is to integrate animals. So all natural systems include animals. There aren't any ecosystems that don't have animals somewhere in them. And you don't have to have a herd of goats, like I use goats and sheep to clean up my garden. You don't have to have that. I certainly wouldn't recommend it, especially if you live in the city. But you can use animal products like manure, or animal byproducts like bone meal and blood meal, fish emulsion, compost. A good quality compost would have, the vermicompost may have worm castings in it. Worms are animals. And a good quality compost will have all those microbes in it too. So all of these different types of animal byproducts have more of the bacteria and things that your soil is craving. Okay, let's see. I think that is it. I'm going to hand it back over to you, Shanine.
Thanks, Kirsten. Does anybody have any questions on those things? I know they are maybe brand new concepts to y'all. I know I always learn something when I listen to Kirsten speak on soil health principles. Any questions before we move forward? That's great. If you think of anything, just go ahead, type it in the chat box, unmute yourself, let us know. We're going to move into the actual experiment now. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce y'all to it. And then we're going to actually go ahead and actively plant our undies today. So this is the Soil Your Undies Challenge. What the heck is that? It is a national and actually international experiment that has been going on for a couple years now. We're going on year 3, and it started in Oregon in 2018. farmers went ahead and planted 100% cotton underwear, which is what y'all have at home. And that helps us. It's a good indicator of the soil life, especially microbe life in your soil, wherever you plant it. So we're going to plant, quote unquote, a pair of 100% cotton underwear to see how much of that piece of cloth the microbes eat over the course of 60 days. And there's some real great pictures online. We can share a link with you. We'll share some photos from across the nation at our last meeting, but it's fascinating. Some just come up with the elastic band from those underwear, and some are almost completely whole. Really depends on your soil. So we in Greenville County are going to partake in this, and I'm so excited. So I put together a little video to show you what we're going to do. So all we are going to do is dig a hole. But before y'all go outside, grab one of those flags that were provided in your kits. And I would suggest a Sharpie or something permanent. And go ahead and write the date on there. And if you want to do like Soil Your Undie Challenge or something like that, that would be great. But today is June 29th. So once you have that flag labeled, we're going to go ahead and you're going to go outside. You need it to be about 13 by 13 inches. Mine was about 12 by 12, and 3 inches deep is the important part. You want to be able to lay that pair of cotton underwear flat in the bottom of your hole. And then cover it. So lay those cotton underwear in, cover it with soil, and mark exactly where you planted that, so you don't lose them later. And you can choose anywhere you want to plant these, to do this experiment. If you're curious what your flower bed soil health is like, go ahead and plant it there. If there's a place in your yard where things like aren't really growing, maybe it's like lack of microbes. And this could be a good way to kind of test that out and see where it's at. So we've dated our flag, y'all have your materials, and if you have not already, you have 15 minutes right now in the middle of our time together. The only thing we are burying is the cotton underwear. So when you unroll it, there's a piece of burlap here. We're going to use that in a future experiment. So go ahead and save that somewhere. Also make sure you save your rubber band, because we'll need that in a future experiment as well. So all you need, cotton undies, a trowel or a shovel, and a little bit of elbow grease. See you all very soon. Go plant your undies. Welcome back. Okay. Anybody have any questions? Because we are wrapping up here. Kirsten asked in the chat, did anyone have trouble digging even just the 3 inches? Clay soil, yes, like a brick. Dennis says his were buried near his tomato plants, so they'll get watered. Well, Dennis, probably, but that's what we want. We want to know how exactly what your soil is doing with the care that you're providing it. So that's good. Okay, well, I'm going to go over what to expect in the next 60 days from us. So here's the schedule for the next couple months. First, we're going to send you different experiments that you can do in the area that you planted your undies for the next, 8-ish weeks, 60 days. So every other week, we'll send you a new one. We recommend doing it the week that we send it, but if you wait till the very end to do all of them, that's fine too. record your results somehow. For the critter critique, we're going to send you a checklist that you can go ahead and say, I found this and how many you might have found, and we'll give you more instructions. We're also going to post videos so you can kind of see how to do these experiments. So you'll receive those via an email from the library, so keep a lookout for those. So we'll do a critter critique because we talked about soil as a habit, right? A habitat, excuse me, right? So we want to see things living in our soil. The next one we're going to do is called a soil structure experiment, or for you excited scientists out there, it's an aggregate stability experiment. And that one's really cool. We're going to drop a chunk of soil into a cup of water and see how much it breaks apart. We want it to hold steady because that is a habitat, a shelter that would be stable for organisms, right? So if it breaks apart, that says something. If it holds for a while, that says something. Anyway, so we'll send you a video and all of the instructions to do that. For that one, you're going to need your rubber band and that piece of burlap. So make sure you put those in a place that you won't forget where they're at. And then finally, once we get into August, I know we're talking about August already, we're going to do a find your hard pan experiment. And that's where you're going to use that second white flag. And Kirsten and I are going to work on putting a video together to really explain what a hard pan is and why it's important to know where it is. And then finally, we're going to reconvene here together live on the 26th of August. And you're going to uncover your undies. You're going to show us your undies. And we're going to analyze our results together. So what we'll ask that day is that you bring a little overview of what you found in some of the other experiments. And we'll talk about what the differences were. The other thing, if you have the ability to take photos of the area that you planted your undies in, that would be great as well, because that'll give us a visual to go with what the experiment results are. So we'll have all of that. Also, anytime y'all have any questions throughout the next 60 days or into the future forever, Kirsten and I are always available. It is our job and we love it. So please email us, call us with any questions. Our contact information is right here. And again, we have a couple more minutes. So if anybody has any questions right this moment, we would be happy to answer those as well. Rachel, I don't see any questions, so we'll hand it back to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you all for attending. Many thanks to Shanine and Kirsten for sharing their expertise, and of course to Greenville County Soil and Water Conservation District for letting us partner with them on this great experiment. If you want more tips on gardening and sustainability, be sure to use your library card. Your library card is your ticket to so many free resources, databases, downloadables, streaming, all of that fun stuff. And you can always get more seeds for your garden if that soil is nice and healthy by checking out the seed library at the Berea branch. That's permanently there. And you can also check our website for any pop-up seed library visits we might be planning. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter for library updates, and sign up for our e-newsletter so you never miss out on events like this one. Be sure to stay tuned for our next live event in this series on August 26th. So that's coming up 60 days, just like Shanine and Kirsten were letting us know. And in the meantime, check out our online calendar to see what other virtual events you might like to take part in. And also check out our adult virtual activities page for anything on demand. So your library is always 24/7. Thank you so much for your time, and we look forward to seeing you very soon. Thank you.